So I just watched another show online, and because I didn't hear Brendan Schaub say this, but apparently he said, if you're not fighting in the UFC, you ain't shit. Okay, excuse my French. Sorry, I know some kids may watch this. I apologize for the language, but that's a direct quote. So, um, what are you saying? What are you trying to get to? I mean, because to me, what you're doing there, you're either self-serving, you're either saying, well, I fought in the UFC, so I'm better than all you people, um, or it's just another stupid statement. I mean, this is what he's done. I mean, since he got out and has started doing his own thing, he has gotten incredibly arrogant. Um, his stand-up is terrible. I've seen some things on his stand-up, and he's rambling, talking, but he's not funny. Joe Rogan is funny. Joe Rogan is fantastic. Brian Callen is funny. Brendan Schaub, what I've seen, okay, I've not seen the full show, to be fair. What I've seen, he's not good at all. He's playing on some celebrity, and now he's an expert on MMA, which he fought in UFC. I mean, I'll give you all the credit in the world there, man. I'm not trying to argue that. But can we be honest that that statement is absolutely ridiculous? Do you really think that if you don't fight in UFC, you're no good? There's a lot of people who haven't fought in UFC who are very good. There's a lot of people who have fought in UFC and succeeded and moved on because there were better financial opportunity. Eddie Alvarez is making a fortune. Uh, Demetrius Johnson is not a good fighter anymore because he's left the UFC. I mean, come on, he's one of the best. Pound for pound, he was one of the best that there was. Fedor was not a good fighter. I mean, come on. There are guys all over. There are guys in one championship. There's some great, especially the lighter weights there are really good. Tell me Douglas Lima's no good? At 170, he's Gegard Mousasi is no longer any good. You can go on and on. I mean, it'll get boring. But to say those things is just, it's stupid. I mean, people thought Stephen A. Smith said something stupid, and I agree the way he said it was wrong. And I agree what he was trying to do was, I don't know, some kind of, I think he was just trying to stir the pot, trying to make himself irrelevant by saying something that no one else was saying. He said, we didn't learn anything about Conor in this fight. We learned a little. We learned that Conor was serious. We learned he was in shape. We learned that he was still on point and could still do things. We didn't learn whether or not his cardio would be good for 25 minutes. We didn't learn how his ground game is because he didn't do those things. And I get it. I know what Stephen A. Smith was saying. I get it. But with this, I don't understand what Brendan Schaub is getting at. I can't determine what your point is and why you would say that. I mean, to me, it sounds self-serving. It's like, well, I'm better than all these other people because they didn't fight in the UFC, and I'm on this high level. And he acts like that now. He's very cocky. He's very sure of himself. He's very, and he does it without merit. He was, hey man, the guy was a good athlete. He was a good fighter. I'm not trying to knock him and his skills on what he did. I'm trying to point out that what he said in this regard is really stupid. It is not correct. It is not fair. It is not factual. I mean, the UFC, by and large, I'll say they have the best talent, by and large. If you put everybody together from every fighting group, if they did cross promotions and they had a tournament, with brackets and define the champions, I think probably most of them would come from the UFC. I'll give you that. But it's not exclusive. And it's not that some of the guys, Douglas Lima is not a top welterweight. I mean, where would he rank? I don't know. But I wouldn't say he's a bum. I wouldn't say he's a bad fighter because he's not in the UFC. I don't think that's fair. I don't think you can say that straight across the board. I mean, where are all the fighters? Where do they come from? You know, when Pride got bought out by the UFC, same thing happened in Strikeforce. But when Pride got bought out, the UFC stripped the fighters, but they brought them over. They brought over the Rampage Jacksons, and they brought over, and Anderson Silva came over, and Vanderlei Silva came over, and I mean, blah blah blah. All kinds of people. These people were coming over from another organization, and many of them won titles. Well, I think you're making the point. There were great fighters over there, and they brought the best of them over. Minotauro came over. He won a title. Did they all win? No. Were they dominant? Not all of them. But they had great fighters. There were great fighters in Pride. There were great fighters they brought out of Strikeforce. They brought out great fighters from WEC. You can't put it that way. And I think when Brendan SchauB does try and put it that way and does try and make that the narrative that if you're not in UFC, you're nothing, that's very dismissive of people who are working their butt off and people who are winning fights and winning titles and doing great things in other organizations. And I don't think that Brendan SchauB is an expert on it. And I think maybe to some extent he's doing what Stephen A. Smith did. He's trying to stir things up. He's trying to make himself relevant. There are so many people doing this now. These like what I'm doing, okay? And so many of them are far above me, and what they're doing and getting great interviews and they've been doing it longer. But one thing is, I'm an expert on MMA. I am a black belt in many disciplines. I've trained fighters. I've fought myself. I've done all, completely different level. I didn't fight in the UFC. I get it. But I don't think you can be dismissive to somebody and say, well, you don't know what you're doing. There's a lot of people who know what they're doing and know what they're talking about who didn't fight in the UFC. And Brendan is trying to pump himself up with his statements and give himself credibility with it. He's not saying that. And that's the brilliance of you trying to brainwash people, is you quietly say something where you don't actually have to say it, and then very quickly people in their own mind come to that conclusion. And I just think that he's trying to make himself relevant by what he says. Like, oh, I better listen to that because he's saying things no one else is saying. And I find it very disingenuous, and I find it right. And he's not even the type of guy you would take that advice from anyway. He's not somebody that's like, oh, he was a champion, for 10 fights in a row. He was the best heavyweight. Okay, then you'd have somewhere to gauge this from, to take this and accept what he's saying for whatever merit he has. Joe Rogan had to tell him, you need to quit. You're not going anywhere. And I think that speaks volumes too. And now, since he's out of the game for a little while, he's now criticizing people in other organizations that have more clout than he does. That have more, because you fought in the UFC isn't, the be all end all. It's a hell of an accomplishment to get to the UFC and all that. But it's a great accomplishment to get into any of those big organizations and do well. And I think it's just a slap in the face to everyone who's working hard every day to achieve their goals, to just dismiss them because your opinion is biased and trying to sell more, of whatever you're selling. I don't know what he's selling. I don't know what exactly he's doing, but he's trying to make himself relevant, I guess. And I find it really insulting to people who work hard, because that's everybody started somewhere, and they have to get to the top by achieving their goals. And being rude to them, that's the main thing with this sport is you do shake their hand, touch gloves for a fight, because that's an acknowledgement that they went into the gym for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, just like you, and busted their butt to get to where they are. And if they're not in the UFC, it doesn't mean they're a loser. And I just think it's a very unfair statement from somebody who doesn't know what he's talking about, apparently. I don't like to knock him. I find a lot of his stuff entertaining, but on this, he's just flat wrong.